It's been a week with the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph and the white dial on my wrist. I purchased it almost exactly a week ago on Black Friday of 2024. Today's December 7th of 2024. And so I'd like to just say a few words in this brief video about what it's been like to own the Murph for 7 days or so. Now, the first thing that's really stood out to me over the past week is the size of the Murph. Given my 17 centimeter or 6 3/4 inch wrist, the 38 millimeter diameter really just feels at home on my wrist. The lugs are really just wrapped perfectly around the edges of my wrist. I don't think I have a watch that's quite as comfortable all around. And a big part of that is also the thickness of this watch. Given the 11 millimeter thickness, it's really been easy to slide it under cuffs when I'm going to work wearing dress shirts. I can hide it very easily. I can also just bring it up to my face like this, and more often than not, I'll be able to quite easily get a quick glance of what time it is. So the size has been absolutely phenomenal. Just as a mid-size watch, I know that the 42 millimeter Murph is really the original size in which it came. And for some folks, it's the true size, the one that really does pay proper respect and homage to the movie version that came out in Interstellar. And that's fair enough, but for those of us with smaller wrists, I do think that this 38 millimeter size is just really, really flattering. It's really compelling me to go with watches that are smaller than 40 millimeters going forward, generally speaking. The other thing that I want to touch on here is the strap. I also talked about it during my sort of first reaction video. Now, this leather strap, made out of like calf leather with this sort of crocodile style design to it, yes, it is definitely stiff coming out of the box, right? You hear it in a bunch of other reviews as well. The thing for me is it's made out of leather. Like, it's going to break in. For me, after a week or so on the wrist, it feels like it's already breaking in quite a bit. It feels comfortable as I sit here right now. And sure, the first 5-10 seconds that I initially put it on, even today, I do feel the still stiffness of the strap, but by the time, a few hours, maybe even a few minutes have passed, I don't really notice it. I know that fast forward a few months or, a couple years from now, it's going to get really, really supple. And so I don't mind the, out of the box stiffness of this leather strap, especially given that this stitching on the side here, it complements the hour markers just so well. I know that this must have been an intentional decision, a design decision on the part of Hamilton, and I just really appreciate it. On top of that, the tapering on this strap is much appreciated as well. I don't know exactly what it tapers to, but it's quite visible, that tapering. It's 20 millimeters at the lugs, and I would assume it's probably 18 near the clasp. Fairly, moderate tapering there, but it's notable and it's appreciated. Now, during my first video, I also wanted to talk about the dial, and I did talk about the dial. The problem was the footage that came out was not exactly the best representation of the pebble-like dial that I was talking about. And so hopefully this go around I can do it a bit more justice. Really, when you're just looking at it from afar, right? Couple seconds to see what time it is, it definitely just looks like a plain matte white dial. That's sort of what I was looking for when I went into the shop a week ago, looking for a wide dial watch on a leather strap. But the great thing about watches in general, right, is there are these certain pieces where it requires you to take a pause. It requires you to look a little bit deeper and see these details that are not as loud, as blatant, as obvious when you're just taking a quick glance at them. And this Hamilton Khaki Field Murph definitely has that. The pebble-like dial here, it's kind of entrancing. The typical thing to say here is it can be dangerous even, especially when you're driving. But no lie and no exaggeration, I have stared at it for a little bit too long while driving. I try to do so at red lights so that I can mitigate the risk of something crazy happening, but it is true. I also want to talk about the printing on the dial. This printing, I mean, I believe this is my first watch, yes, that has printing like this. Yeah, it is. And so what I found myself thinking while just looking at the hour markers in particular is it just looks like art. Like specifically drawing art. I am not one of these people, but if you ever come across somebody or folks in your life who are just really artistically talented and are able to sketch things out and draw, usually with like pencil, just really, really well. It kind of looks like that. It looks like somebody just did that and then they went ahead and programmed the machine to be able to replicate the exact same thing and just did so en masse. It is really just stunning and beautiful to look at, and it's similar to the pebble-like dial phenomenon that I was talking about a second ago. It's just one of those things that requires you to take a moment to slow down and just look a little bit deeper. And I absolutely love that about this watch. Let's stick with the hour markers for a second longer. Now this faux patina, which just has this really nice vintage vibe to it, as faux patina ought to, or really is just designed to. I really appreciate it, and I've actually found myself intentionally putting together outfits that take advantage of this faux patina. More sort of camel type looks, and maybe even some yellows and mustards here and there I find myself wearing just to sort of, again, point out or call out to none other than myself, really. It's just for myself. This faux patina set of hour markers and hands for that matter, and it's just really fun. Lastly, on the dial, related to the markers, I was remiss in sort of not bringing up the lume in my first video. Now, lume is not really a big point of discussion, I would think, for a watch like this anyway, but lume in general is something that most watch enthusiasts just put a lot of stock into, and B, a feature of this watch that has crossed my mind this past week, mostly because on the one hand, it's beautiful, right? The Arabic numerals, one of the reasons I purchased this watch, seeing the Arabic numeral design light up in the dark, that is just really cool to me, not having had that in any of my watches prior, right? However, on the other hand, the lume is less than stellar. I mentioned this in my previous video, but the vast majority of my watches in the collection are Seikos. I have a couple of Seiko divers, not even dive style watches, but a couple of actual divers that one could use to go at least recreational diving, right? And the lume on this Hamilton just pales in comparison to those. I don't find it to be a huge problem. It's not the type of watch that would go anywhere near an environment like diving in the first place. And frankly, for me, Loom is just not that big of a deal personally, right? Like, yeah, sure, for the few seconds that I'm going from the downstairs of my condo to the upstairs, I can't quite see the time as clearly, but I'll get to the top and I'll figure it out. It's not a big deal for me personally. All in all, I am still in love with this watch. The overall quality, right? I don't know that I can say it's the watch in my collection with the absolute best quality. We'll get to those in a subsequent video. I'm really looking forward to showing you all the one watch in particular. Actually, it is probably still my favorite watch, despite how much wrist time this Murph has gotten over the past 7 days. So really excited to show that to you all. But yeah, the quality on this watch really is amazing. I still find myself just in awe at the combination of different finishes, right? The polishing on the bezel it's really striking given all the brushing around it. Like I mentioned in my last video, the winding action, it's so satisfying, and it is different from Japanese made watches. I will say that it feels, I'm not saying that it's better, but it's different, and the novelty aspect of that winding action was something that really compelled me, right? Like 8 days ago when I first bought this thing. So yeah, I mean, I do not regret this first Swiss watch purchase. Comment down below about what Swiss watch was your first purchase, was your first addition to the collection. Do you have a Swiss watch? If not, then what's the first one that you're looking forward to purchasing someday? Thank you all for watching. Appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.